I just want to be known for when help was required on an empathetic, non-judgment basis, help was provided in a manner that actually solved the challenge. My absolute passion is just helping founders with the things that I found difficult to get help with. So if I could just be known as someone that was of value, and when we called, we got some help, I'm happy with that.
Hey, Don, great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
And you. Thanks, Ricky. Thanks, Sean. Great to be here. First time, long time.
That's it, mate. Hey, tell us a little bit about you, Don. What sparked your interest into tech? What got you here?
What sparked my interest into tech? I was at school. My father had engendered quite an investing focus. And so from the early teens, I really enjoyed investing. And then when I left school, started creating a few little algorithms around some risk management and foreign exchange and futures and that kind of stuff, and would make all the money I could at McDonald's and plow it into that, and lose all the money I could in futures and options and that kind of thing. But at that same time, I got a lucky break from my old man, who backed me into a little home improvements business, and somehow found my way into the insurance side of construction. And so this little business had a lot of relationships with loss adjusters, they're called. And so it was really around the time I remember getting my first email assignment, and I was incensed because how did they know I even checked my email every week? That was just silly. There's a perfectly good fax machine. Why are we using email? So that's how early.
Showing your age there, Don.
Yeah. And so I had a bit of a tech bent and a passion for these kinds of things. I created, back then it was called a web-based platform. The cloud as a word did not exist. And it was actually a couple of guys out of Ireland and the whole goal was to start to automate what I was doing with the construction side. So when an insurer needed something, if there was an email coming in, automatically read it, put it into the database. My estimators could track it, scope of work. I know you guys are the Simpro guys. We looked towards a lot of the stuff that you guys were doing because it was that kind of functionality, but in a more closed ecosystem. And that just grew. That just grew like a weed. And I saw that actually, instead of being down at the building side and having to deal with all of that stuff, why not go up to the management side and create almost a project management platform where insurers could put the claims in the top end. I'd be able to manage a supply chain at the bottom end. And then we had smart algorithms that, based on a builder's or a supplier's average cost, customer satisfaction, speed, the algorithm would then weight work towards the higher performers, and the lower performers would then drop off. And grew that around Australia, got into New Zealand by acquiring a company that was essentially insolvent, but fortune favors the brave when you're early 20s and you're not smart enough to know any different. So I bought this thing that was structurally in trouble, but had some client relationships. And then the Christchurch earthquakes happened, and we went from, can't remember what it was, 15 people to hundreds in a very short period of time. So I learned about growth, but also about scaling tech. And then we went into the UK, and then we did some partnerships. And anyway, that's the short, long version of my passion for tech.
Pretty cool, mate. And then how's the experience as a founder, operator? Has that your outlook on startups?
Yeah. What I try and do with the startups that we invest in, and there's two parts of that. There's the angel investing side, and then there's the tribe VC side, is that when you can have a real empathy for what they're going through and actually understand not all of their, but a lot of their problems that they either don't think are normal, or that they're trying to hide from the rest of the world because they feel that maybe they're not good founders. But when you've been there and you've seen enough of those patterns and you've experienced that, you can actually have a conversation to help them go, this is normal, a bit like having kids. My 3-year-old wakes up at night, wets itself, is very unstable on their feet, lacks all emotional control, and all of that's quite normal. When their father, i.e. me, has those same behaviors, my wife gets a little bit annoyed. It's understanding what's normal and what's abnormal. And when you've been a startup founder, or when you've scaled, and when you've taken something public, and when you've gone through those life cycle location phases, you can just have a bit more of a perspective. A bit like grandparents are always a hell of a lot calmer, because they're just like, calm down. This is okay. Concentrate over here.
Been there, done it before, approacher.
But one of the things I love about you and content, Pat, you're not shy from talking about failures and things that went wrong and things that didn't work. And I think it's something as an industry we've got to get better at doing, because I think that's the stuff that can really help your founders as you invest in stuff. If you're comfortable talking about the things that went wrong, that's where lessons are learned. That's where you get growth from. And I think that's a powerful thing that you do. You're not shy about saying, hey, this didn't work out. I did this. I'm being you. I know where this is going. I know where this story ends. How do you find founders taking that sort of advice?
I think it's incredibly important. B, I've just, like with my journey, that I had compounding lucky breaks when I was very young, 18, then early 20s. And then even the purchasing of this New Zealand entity was a lucky break. Although at the time when I bought it, and then the first meeting with a client was, you owe us $400,000. That thing has been over billing us. At the time, you don't think you were lucky, but that thing then went on to, I think we paid about $500,000 for it, but it went on to produce about 30 million in cash profits and then got sold. The problem with that was it was all success component of success. Now, because I had bought that one and then another one that worked out really well, another one came up, which was like 10 times the size. And because I'd only known success, I thought the same playbook was going to occur. But this thing was totally different. It was 35 offices around Australia. It had hundreds of people, but it was at a different phase of the life cycle. And it was only until I got into it that I realized that I didn't know my ass from my elbow. And it was actually then a series of cascading failures and fuck ups. It's quite a humbling experience where you go from one of the youngest MDs of a listed entity that you took there to your mother's couch in a very short period of time, whilst you've got to go and deal with all of the restructuring and debt and financing and all that kind of stuff. And during those times, you're unsure whether you're going to be able to get out. But actually, if you back yourself and you surround yourself with good people and you try and instill a bit of authenticity, you can actually get out of it, which is what I did. But it was the failures that actually where the value was. And my value isn't going to our portfolio or the startups and saying, hey, here's all the great things that I've done. I tend to try and forget those. It's actually, here's the fuck ups. I should have checked. Do we have a language warning on this, or
No.
Here's the screw ups. This is what was happening. And often because founders, we have a general view that really great founders come from an environment of some form of trauma, big or small, that they've got a chip on their shoulder that they're trying to prove their way out of. I was no different, and being able to understand what's the psychology of going here, what's the impulse that's happening here, why is this behavior going the way it is, and trying to catch that early before it manifests into some of the screw ups that I perpetuated, that in hindsight, you look at it now and go, what were you thinking? But at that time, when you don't know any better.
Of course.
Everyone who's been successful has been in that spot, right? Where you fail and it goes wrong, and it's the pushing through that I think leads you to that ultimate success long term.
You often just don't talk about it. It is becoming more prevalent
100%.
now.
Okay.
And what I also find is that they sometimes misdiagnose what the issue was, both on the failure side and on the success side. It's sort of when the successes go, we were successful because of passion and vision and all of these things. I know a whole shit ton of founders that had all of that in spades, and it was required but not sufficient. But actually the difference were these underlying ingredients, these structural elements that existed for them that they weren't probably present to or understanding. And that's where I really like to play, because if it was easy, everyone would do it. If it was just simple as money, a good product and a good team, a lot more teams would be successful. But actually that's the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot of other elements, and it's those elements that we like to try and identify and help our portfolio with.
Yeah, I agree. Don, I said this to one of the other guests, and I'll repeat the question. Basically, I have a firm opinion that if you have a product and it's sellable and you've got some early traction, from there on, you can invest enough resource and get your product continuously to where you need it to. However, that's not the challenge most Aussie Kiwi startups face. So in your experience, with everything that you've gone through and all the investments that you do make, what are the one or two major challenges that you often find that these companies are facing other than the product?
So humans have evolved by ensuring that we're probably one of the most self-centered species out there. It's amazing how we get into a situation where we've created this whole world and it's just the way we are, right? And what happens with founders, I think one of the biggest issues, they become so self-centered on themselves and the product, and they get so product focused. And they just, like with our pitches, we've now actually stopped allowing people just to organically pitch. We actually need you to pitch like this. And I don't want to know about your product features almost at all until pretty well the end of the call, because actually what is more important is a whole lot of other factors. And so for me, the product, sure, a product has to have some threshold parts. But the common mistake is understanding that actually the go-to-market, and what's one of the biggest factors that they get wrong is not realizing that people engage when they read or hear words that resonate with their story. Your story doesn't matter. Your product doesn't matter. Who you are absolutely doesn't matter, unless you have first opened the door by going, I understand your story and I can connect with you. And then now, how does my product solve your story? Why am I the one backed? It's that sequence of things. And that's what I think. And it's not just Aussie and Kiwi. I think it's across the board. They just get wrong understanding that your story doesn't matter. It's the counterparties, it's the offsider's story that matters. And you've got to work out a way of how do you open the door to get into their story where you can become the solution to that. And that is so often the case. And then the second bit is, again, to that other part, is that there's a lot of weight put on strategy, vision, mission, but structure achieves strategy. And the structure that I'm talking about, you've seen The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. A great
Too many
movie.
times.
It's all about his passion and his energy and his work ethic. I humbly submit that if Michael Jordan was a 4'2" person missing a leg, born 50 years ago in Albania, I don't give a shit how passionate and how much energy and how much hard work you are. Structurally, you don't have the structure to be the world's greatest basketballer. And so maybe we can change our structure, right? And maybe we've got to change our vision and mission. Maybe we've got to do a little bit of both. Maybe we've got to do a bit of a dance. But too often, people, I think the mistake is, I've just got to have passion. I've just got to have vision. I've just got to have a great product. Actually, there's a whole lot of structural elements. If you've got, I don't know, like me, 3 kids, a mortgage and a wife and all these other bits and pieces, you cannot just go and couch surf and start a startup on the smell of an oily rag if you want to have functioning relationships. So structurally, if that's what this business requires, we have a structural problem. So maybe that's where a team, or maybe that's where, and so those are the 2 hobby horses I flog the most.
Yeah, we call it building the machine, right?
Yeah,
build that machine, build that structural machine behind you that actually gets the business going forward.
I think we all had the same opinion. So therefore, for this episode, I'd like to play devil's advocate. There are a lot of people who I'm sure who will say the same to you, Don, and say the same to us. If my product is so good, so let's bring some real experience in play, like Xero, Canva, Atlassian, PLG-led. There is a massive shift as far as those people are concerned that PLG actually can work and PLG works. What are your views on that?
So what I find interesting, in one of our podcast episodes, we put up a chart of the world's best PLG companies and the size of their sales forces that
100%.
that sit behind. I think PLG is very important for certain types of products where people can on-ramp, as long as then the whole PLG user experience matches and the pricing matches and your resourcing can match. And too often what we see is enterprise trying to be PLG, either because it's cool or they don't have the money to be enterprise. That ain't going to fly. If you're enterprise, there are some bits that you can learn from PLG, or if you are PLG, don't go and overlay yourself with an enterprise. kind of thing. So I think you've got to make sure that your product and your market, like a Canva, to me, is beautifully PLG orientated, given the market that they actually started off and went on to. But I would humbly submit, in terms of Canva's life cycle, between Cliff and Mel and then their structure and then what they were able to do, and they were able to build these little bits of momentum, and then they found Cameron, and then they did all these other things. They had a range of structural elements that money couldn't actually solve in the early days. They got momentum that they then overlaid money. And then Xero absolutely has some PLG aspects, but if you look at their channels of how Xero has gotten out through the accountants and the conversational sales forces that allowed that initial momentum of those channels to go, I'm not sure that you could sit back in a lot of PLG companies these days and just say they're true. What a lot of founders consider PLG, which is I build a product, hit a button, and then sit and just
sells itself. My product sells itself. It's just on the internet. People find
it's all going to roll in. Now, by definition, the space that we play in is more enterprise. So I would probably be a reasonably weak guest on PLG, but a common friend of ours and a common investment of ours is Cake. And when you look at what Kim has done there to really focus that company towards PLG, but make no mistake, when you go into that office, there are people that are still driving things.
Do you find when you guys invest in companies, you spend a good majority of your time working through go-to-market, scaling, like going from that transition from founder-led sales to building a scalable go-to-market team?
Absolutely, except depends on where they are in the life cycle. Pre-series, so we're not seed, we're like a little bit pre-series A. Series.
Got it, yeah.
Right.
So you're a bit further down the line, but you'd hope most of them have at least begun that transition into like a go-to-market style.
Well, that pre-series, we're backing a founder, and do we think that this founder has the maturity and the EQ to make the transition that he's going to need to make? Then we can bring the methodology. We bring the roadmap and the playbook on how to do that. But for a little while, until we get to that critical state, we will just leave them alone. Like we don't, it's watching out for some of those signs. Now, once a founder starts to get tired or things start to change, what we then do is we then go in and start doing some workshops with them to help start cascading things away. And then at the later phase, like we've now, a lot of traditional VC, they have the people that will help you hire people, like it's an HR function. We've gone, no, that's a core competency you've got to build. We're going to help more on the go-to-market. So we've been investing in content creation, content creators, actually having people that do work on behalf of the portfolio without the portfolio knowing. And then when we think it looks good, we go to the portfolio and say, hey, we think we've got a little experiment to run here. Here's some videos that we've had created. This is the channel that we think we're going to go through. And we spent a lot of time in educating ourselves on some marketing automation tools, some AI tools, because you can tell now when someone has sent you an automated message. The only way we're going to be able to do this at scale is to make sure that it can look human and that content really has to resonate. And back to that earlier point, people don't care about your story until their own story has been understood. And so we've got to make sure that our messaging and our content is unbelievably good at getting to that message.
Just on that note though, Don, like how do you find that alignment between you as investors and founders and operating team? I think there's normally quite a different vision one holds versus investors. So how do you bring that in?
So we're an influence based, like at this phase of Tribe's journey, we've only led one deal. We're not big enough to lead.
Okay.
Right. So we're sometimes a rounding error. And what we do through conversation and just catching up is we then share some of our expertise, share some of our case studies, share them understanding, we understand their story, and then get invited in to do certain aspects. Now, you can lead a horse to water. Sometimes the founders, especially in the early stage, they're just going to do their thing, right? And a bit like parents and children, you got to let them do their thing, and you got to understand what's normal and abnormal and not get too upset. If stuff starts to get abnormal, we will then start to go and talk to the other shareholders. And if we're not on the board, we'll then go and start to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. What do you think? And often, let's call it more financial-based investors see the issue, but don't have the experience to understand why it is happening or what to do about it. And what we often provide is that linchpin of, oh, okay, you're seeing this thing. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Let's work together. But it's not we're not at a point where we're not like a venture studio where if you take our money, you have to do this. On some earlier stage business, like one we're closing now, we're probably gone a little bit closer to venture studio because we understand it so well. We've then brought the content creators, the marketing stuff. They've looked at it and said, absolutely love it. So that's probably a little bit of a diversion of that. But yeah, we're more carrot type approach than stick. And that just comes from Aaron, who I met well before Tribe. The reason why it's called Tribe is all about the more humanistic side. It's about that connection. Now, we believe that by deploying these kinds of things, we can get a good return or a better return for our LPs. But we'll have to do a podcast in about 8 years from now to work out if that's true.
So we can do a commiseration podcast in 8 years. How do we go?
Hey, one thing that we connected on, Don, was in particular subject was around the transition from founder-led organization to professional-led CEO organization. That's quite a complicated transition. You would have seen that many times over. What tips and strategies do you have for managing that transition effectively?
So I
both the parties.
Yeah. So I had a board and had private equity on, and they tapped me on the shoulder one day and said, well done, young man, time to hire a CEO, especially moving into that public environment. And here's what happens traditionally. Either the founder gets tired or gets told, doesn't really matter. But then in comes the professional CEO. Have a look at Apple with Scully and Steve Jobs. And for a little while, it's all rosy and it's all humming and it's all good. But the challenge is that the founder builds, or the founders build companies that are a well-tailored suit to them. How they like to work, who they like to work with, how they like to operate, how they make decisions, what they'll let people get away with, what they won't. It's this organic thing that's not written down, but it's perfectly built to suit them. Then, for whatever reason, in comes the GM, COO, CEO, and there hasn't been a systemic approach to it. And now we're trying to squeeze these people. And what are these people? They're really about controls and systems and process and development and predictability. The total opposite to what the fucking founder wants, right? But the founder doesn't realize that yet. So now we've got competing energies. Founder, which is open and scale and big and new and change. And why can't we be doing these things? And the people, risk. And the people that are brought on are actually there to bring systems and processes and controls. And when I had my screw up, I went to the US and started working for an institute called the Odysseus Institute. Dr. Ishak Odysseus, it was actually my ex-wife's sister's neighbor or friend or something that gave her a book called The Ideal Executive and Why You Can't Be One. And she gave that to me for Christmas, I think, or something. So
was that a hint?
Ishak Odysseus is an absolute genius and has systemized these things. And suddenly when I realized that he'd been working with the Pratt family and Jack Cowan and the Gandells and this who's of Australia's business elite on these things, working with him taught that actually, no, once you've made the decision to bring on that transition, there's actually a series of steps that need to happen. We've got to retailor this suit. If you try and bring a professional manager in whose profession is systems, processes, controls, and all of that, and squeeze them into your suit, what it's going to lead to is conflict. And what happens is there starts to be this destructive conflict, and you see the cycles. Have a look at Twiggy Forrest at the moment, right? In comes people. They have there's all of this.
Yeah.
Spits them out. They were the idiots. So we'll get a new person. I'll just get a new person, 6 months, 9 months, do it again. And I've seen family businesses do this for decades, right? Because what is actually missing is a series of steps in between. And so what we try and do is we first go in and say, okay, what do we need to build here to be successful? We need to build a high trust and respect organization, because high trust and respect is what makes an organization goes fast. And why do we need high trust and respect? Because we got to make fast decisions. And if there's any destructive conflict, if there's any lack of trust and respect, at very least it slows us down. At worst, it blows up the place. So what we've got to do is we've got to actually have trust and respect. And when somebody's coming in to run somebody else's baby, you're going to have a hell of a lot of trust and respect. Now, the problem with trust and respect is that it's actually the outcome of other ingredients. And the other ingredients are around vision, mission, and values. And that's incredibly important. But actually, vision and mission and values needs a perfect structure to achieve that vision, mission, and values. And we then break down structure into not just roles and responsibilities, which is what a lot of the world does, but actually authority is such a big issue that's often, I rarely see in a PD that says authority. So if you think of the founder transition, I'm bringing someone in, I want them to be this, but I haven't yet cascaded the authority. And why haven't we cascaded authority? Delegation without the right systems, processes, and controls is abdication, and that leads to bankruptcy. So we've actually got to get role and responsibility, authority, reward systems is a big structural element, and then goals and KPIs to manage those reward systems. So we actually have to retailer that. I prefer with the founder in place, retailing that. Then we can get people perfectly suited for that structure. And that structure is perfectly suited for a mission and vision. Then the final ingredient is the managerial processes that drive trust and respect. So founder-led companies are really built often organically from how the founder likes to make decisions. We then go in, and this is my work in Tribe, is I go in and say, okay, how do we now get a team of people agnostic of the individual that can actually identify problems without killing each other, prioritize those problems without killing each other, implement on time and on budget. And if you find me a successful company, and this is again something from Ishak Cadesis, all they do is manage the change loop, which is change creates problems and opportunities that we need to manage. And all managing is making a decision and implementing it. The problem is there's a problem in that loop. Conflicts build up. Someone sees a problem, someone doesn't agree it's a problem. Or we agree it's a problem, but my self-interest doesn't want me to deal with it. Or we need to, so what we actually have to do is we have to have a managerial process that is perfectly built to traverse that change loop, accepts that there are conflicts, harnesses those conflicts. So that way, good people that now have to become more and more diverse, founders hire people that look like them, that they like to enjoy, that they enjoy working with, right? But actually scaling a company is partly about diversity, because there are broad ingredients that are needed to make a company long-term successful. And entrepreneurialism and the ability to get stuff done is two of those ingredients. That gets you off the ground short term, but longer term, we need systems and processes and controls and integration. And so what we try and do is that middle step is get those four ingredients in place first, recut the organization, vision and mission. And so if the founder is going to transition, part of the vision is we're moving from a founder-led organization to professionally led. That then means our mission. So we do vision and mission, like the vision is to win the war, but then we're going to have a series of missions. Like today, I've got to get the beach. Tomorrow, I've got to get to the top of the hill. That's how we align that. How do we get values? What's the structure to achieve each mission? So that means we then setting up the organization to restructure itself regularly. Every couple of months for all I care, if that's what the mission requires. So then that way I can put the right people in the right roles, supporting those people by all the managerial processes to bring that together. If you have good managerial processes that can harness diverse people that are in a perfect structure for a vision and mission that we're all online with, you are more likely to get high trust and respect. So then that way you can move fast, solving problems and capitalizing on opportunities. But if you don't have a managerial process that harnesses conflict, and it's a bit of a complicated soup and everyone's doing their own thing, and you know what, we don't really have a very strategic way of getting structure aligned to vision and mission, we just hire reactively, you're going to end up with this soup of potentially destructive conflict, low trust and respect, which means we're not going to be able to identify and solve problems and capitalize on opportunities, which means we're going to fall behind and we're not going to be successful. And so for our LPs, that's the work we do. And the idea is that we can get a faster growing business.
So Don, a lot of people listening in to this show, especially founders, we've gone, amazing. Don has just described an amazing machine that will take my business from here to here. Ultimately, as a founder, for me, I don't fit into that. I'm going to be dislodged.
Oh, no.
I'll be put behind the curtains. My name will still be held on the website, but I will play no no part in the success of the business. How do you deal with that?
So companies that do founder transition that ejects the founder, show me one that doesn't go through a shitload of pain and inevitably die. 99% of companies never survive their founder. That's the first thing. Some smart founders sell their company to the next person and it dies in their hands. That's not me trying to be a wanker. That is just, you have a look at companies that buy founder-led businesses before there's been a transition. The brand still exists, but when you look behind the scenes, we ended up shutting down that division, or we didn't keep that going, or that disappeared.
Yeah.
And we think the most functional founder transition is what I'm trying to do as a founder myself and having a lot of empathy for them. I want to give the founders choice. If you want to stay in and you want to work 100 hours a week, we have an approach to this that will allow you to do that. I just want you to have the choice to be working on the things that you're most passionate about. If actually you don't want to, you found a new ball of string or whatever else, I want to give you that choice as well, but still make sure that your baby delivers you a return on all of those things. The thing is, good founder transition is 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And a lot of people don't realize that. I will do it in 6 months. No, not if you want to do it properly. And if you go back and have a look at Apple, Scully gets a big kicking because he almost killed Apple. If Jobs had stayed, Jobs would have killed Apple.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, did Scully go a little bit too far? All I'm trying to offer people is instead of taking a decade and almost killing the company, there is actually an approach where you can do it in a few years. And you as the founder can actually do it with control, and you get to have choice on where you play. So founder transition and founder, I prefer the founder not to have left, but what I don't want them, another word for a founder is arsonist. What we don't want is that uncontrolled energy of all those kinds of things. We want some systems, processes and controls that allow people to actually make that decision. Whereas too often founders don't do it. They then don't have choice. They get dragged back in. They fall out of love for the business. But before the business can get the systems, processes and controls, the business has died.
Yeah. Let's change the subject here a little bit. 2020 through to 2022, there was this massive bubble. SaaS was just blowing up, right? We all know the success stories that came on back of it. What was the most notable mistakes that you took note of during that phase?
Look, 2020 to 2022, I think, and me personally and others, it's just remembering that humans and FOMO is such a real thing. And it was almost like in the peak of it, like the world was going to be different forever. And if we didn't get on some of these trains, we were gone forever. And we've done 9 investments since Tribe started. I'm pleased to say only one, and one of our smallest was in that FOMO phase. But that's why we've put a lot of effort into bringing some systems and process into our decision making, constantly then reminding ourselves this too shall pass. The common pattern in the world is, yes, we live in a world of exponential times, but mean reversion is the way that this sucker works, right? And just the stuff that we saw from people that should know better, and the quantums, and FTX to me is the poster child of just, imagine being a VC firm with the brands that went into FTX with no due diligence and somehow convincing yourself a founder playing a video game at the same time as doing a pitch call was something to be held and to throw money at. And the thing for me, what we always keep coming back to, the core of Tribe, is we always use the word health. We try not to use growth, because cancer, as an example, is a form of growth, right? But it's a growth for growth's sake, and it will kill you. And too often in that phase, what happened is people were able to raise money and grow cancer. What we're most interested in is health. If you can build a healthy organization, a healthy company, a healthy culture, there is a hell of a good chance that that is going to lead to some really great companies. Now, the problem is a lot of people don't know how to do that. And that's where I try and concentrate. And that's where I think we differentiate by trying to bring some systemic tools. But people just forgot about health. They just started hitting the buffet and just raising capital to grow, not in a healthy manner, but at all costs. Now, what I'm really excited about, and you guys know you're on the same journey as Tribe, trying to build an emerging manager. Never has anybody said a great company came from an environment where everything was going well. So I think this is a great time for us to be doing this because it's hard. It's difficult. We're going to have to be creative, but it's the same with our early stage businesses. I want them to be healthy. I want them to be resourceful, not resources, right? Be resourceful over resources. How do we get new leads at a marginal cost of zero? How do we use some of this technology to go like that's where running those little experiments. And if you can build a really healthy company, and that's what I think people forgot.
I love 23, 24 outlook because it's back to doing a real business, doing a good, healthy business, and it will be fine. The days of just shooting $1 million out the door to make 250 grand are not there at the moment. And they'll probably swing back. Like I said, I like this period. I think is where Australian, New Zealand businesses are going to shine because we do build really good, healthy businesses.
Totally. Like Cake has got a bit of a Me Too factor, which is why we liked it because there's already validation. We're looking at another Me Too business, but they came looking for 2 million. And at a certain thing, I said, no, not going to make sense. But I reckon we're a great partner. We'll look at and go pretty early, a much smaller check, like 10 times smaller, to do a few experiments. Now we'll do that at a low val, but we'll do some experiments, but then we'll be able to know exactly what has worked. So then it's not a conversation about back me with big money and trust me. It's, no, we did these 40 experiments, these 8 that we know that works. Now we want 2 million. And the good news is the val should be then 10 times more.
And we put the 2 million into those things and you already know the return on those things is X. And so there you go.
So that's, and 12 months ago when I had that conversation with founders, they're like, nah,
I'm good. I'll get my 2 million from
I'll go somewhere else. Now that it's dried up a little bit.
And the best thing is they'll take your 2 million and not waste it. Well, what's happening is they take the 2 million and then go back to you again and go, hey, guess what? I could use $2 million again.
I look after a family office that sort of helps keep all this moving. And prior to me joining, there was an investment that had a capital efficiency. I think 20 million got turned into 1 million in ARR.
Well, that's good usage. Could just bought the 1 million of ARR.
So those are all the horror stories. What about when you flip the table? Like on the other side, when's a good time to take the money off the table?
This is a really interesting question. My first initial impulse is like, whenever you get a chance. No, but it is tricky, right? I've had so many experiences. You've got the 10X down to zero. And we really take our LP responsibilities seriously. What we are looking to do is it doesn't really matter what the future looks like. When there's an opportunity in part of a secondary of an up round to take, say, 10% of your holding and redistribute into the machine, I think that's just become really important. I just don't think LPs anymore are going to allow what the last 10 years has, which has just been raw paper profits. I think we have to take some of those opportunities. Now, we can still have some conviction, and it's becoming more socially acceptable that shareholders and even the founders take a little bit off the table, especially as the business more matures. But we're looking at, there's a company, one of ours is going to be doing a transaction next year. I think they're going to do unbelievably well and continue, but we're going to put 10% of our holding up. We're going to allow the LPs to decide what they want to do there. But I think it's just good behavior. It's good habit. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that would disagree with that, but that's
I like it.
No, I think it's good tips. I think it's super practical. Coming back to you, Don, you're reflecting on your journey of founder, investor. Can you share maybe one valuable lesson that it's taught you? Just one.
Just Mate, you actually is the next question. Thinking this one. I know.
Yeah. Look, I think the journey of someone going through this, whether it's the founder or the investor side, at the end of the day, authenticity to yourself and to your others is the thing that sort of wins. Anytime I've got myself into trouble, both as the founder and on the investor side, there was some impulse, there was something happening. And until I got connected with, hang on, authenticity, integrity, okay, all right, this path that I've now got to take is the harder path. But it's, what is it? Easy decisions, hard life, hard decisions, easy life. I'm surprised at how many times I have to teach myself that lesson. And even as a 40-year-old man, you would have thought by this time you would have that down pat, but I'm just surprised how much I've got to sometimes go back and just go, hang on a minute. I've got myself over my skis here. Whoa. And then go back. Shit. Okay. Like, I just think that is on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that one, Don. And then I guess the other question on back of that, with everything you've done, investment wise, being an operator, what would you have told your 22-year-old self or 18?
Calm down.
Calm the fuck down.
Calm
Chill
down.
out, dude.
I like it.
No, I often reflect on this. I often reflect on this question because it presupposes sometimes that 22-year-old Don would have listened. And I'm not sure I would have.
Yeah.
And this is part of the challenge, right? I don't really do a lot with universities as much as I did in some of the transition stuff because the kids haven't worked in a team yet. They haven't, like when I say change creates problems and opportunities that we need to manage, they go, yeah, sweet. Yeah, but you haven't had personality conflicts of interest, conflict of perspective. Like you haven't had that yet. And so what I would try and tell my 22-year-old self is to get into, I joined a thing called Tech, the Executive Connection, when I was about 30. I should have done that when I was 20, because then you have this group of other people on that journey, some younger, some older, and just to try and get some better rails to run on so you can still have that entrepreneurial energy and to just reduce and what I'd lament isn't the screw ups and the pain it caused me, it's the pain it causes others, whether it's your family or whether it's your employees now I've done a whole lot of work to release that energy and understand a journey is a journey. And through authenticity, you've just got to accept what you did. And if you would do things differently, good, take that forward and share that with others. But there's still always this underlying thing that there was when you got to make people redundant or where shareholders have put money in with certain expectation and then it didn't work out. Understand as a 22-year-old, that's the shit that will sit below the surface, and just be careful with those decisions in the moment that you're making that are easy in the moment, that are kicking a can. They are going to come back and burn you in the ass.
So very true, mate. We've all got scars. I guess going into 2024, Don, a lot has changed. We spoke about it over the last 12, 18 months. What advice would you give to those startup founders?
I think it's going to be an awesome time for people that can get their mind around the structural elements that lead to a durable business. That is having a product that actually solves people's needs that they're willing to pay for. I see so many products built by founders that themselves have a problem, or they look at a market, but actually that problem is not as big as you think. And even if it is that big, people aren't willing to pay for it.
Okay.
And this is the time that you've got to shed all those little things that you're wedded to and go, hang on a minute, is this problem big enough? And how do you know? You do proper MVP methodology stuff, of which there's so much stuff on the internet, right? And you seek to get little bits of market product fit, and you guys spoke about it, is getting that machine going. But I then see people that do have companies that theoretically and products that do solve problems, could get product market fit, but their messaging is god awful. Their messaging is all about how good my product is or how good I am. How many pitches, and you guys will see this, they start telling you about themselves. I don't know whether you and your history is good until I've understood your market, the problem that you've solved, and why you're the person to back. And so again, coming back to what we discussed earlier, people engage when they read or hear the words that resonate with their story. And so I think people have to put less emphasis on the product and more getting that right. Now, how do you know? A practical tip, I always try and get our portfolio or people that I'm mentoring to call either your existing customers or people that haven't bought from you. And you just have hey, what are you actually trying to achieve? Interesting. Why do you want that? What problem gets in your way from getting that? Oh, that's interesting. If you could solve that, what would that get you? Why would you want that? Oh, and why don't you have that again? It's a big circular combo. You do that enough times, you'll find the pattern. And then if you've truly done that and your product isn't taking off, you have a product market fit problem. The problem isn't big enough, right? And I've blown so much money on stuff that I'm really passionate in coaching and support. And we put, I think, $500,000 into a coaching app. It turns out that coaches like to do things organically. They don't want a piece of shit app that forces them into some stuff, even though they told us they did. So that's where I think 2024, those people that can get those two things, money will then flow. Anybody that tells you money's not available, no, money's just becoming a little harder to get. And it really wants to see that you're solving a real problem and your customers are engaging. And those are the two pillars you need to pull.
Yeah, good tips there. Don, what about any favorite domain or segment you're backing that's going to come out as emerging winners over the next couple of years?
I'll start with what I haven't got my head around yet is where to invest in AI. That may make me sound like an idiot. VC is supposed to know. So we're steering the hell away from thin wrapper stuff because I just think a bit like the iPhone when it came out, it had no camera, it had no torch app. And then people built a torch app and then Apple brought out a torch app. I think that's what's going to happen by all of the infrastructure players. So what do I like? We're concentrating on scale economies and network effects. But the definition of network effects that we've really got our head around is not the virality, because I think that's hard. It's more for every additional user that joins this thing, is there some value back to the other users? And a lot of time people think network effects is it's just you invite this person and they invite that person. That has an aspect of it. But what we're actually seeing is where people can get value from community or data or whatever. And so with a lot of our portfolios, we're trying to say, okay, without distracting from the core, what are the things that you could be doing that when someone buys your product or your service, someone else joining gives you a little bit of value? And to me, the easiest one is Culture Amp. It's a survey tool. Why has it become great? Because there's this perceived notion that I'm going to learn where my culture fits against others. And now I'm not inviting people. There's no virality there. And in reality, a lot of the time with the Culture Amp surveys, there isn't much depth to it, but there's this perception of depth. And now that thing's taken off like a rocket ship.
Yeah. See, we used it. I don't know if you got any meaningful data out of it, but we
definitely not.
One from me, Don.
Perception.
Yeah, perception is reality.
So I had a call with a founder yesterday. But this is, you know that. But you're someone in HR who just needs to feel good and protected and whatever else. And you can compare yourself. Click.
Last one from me, Don. So when you do decide to hang up your boots, what do you want to be known for?
This is a cracker. We actually do offsites a few times a year with our founders and we ask them something similar. What was this all for? I just want to be known for when help was required on an empathetic, non-judgment basis, help was provided in a manner that actually solved the challenge. My absolute passion is just helping founders with the things that I found difficult to get help with. So if I could just be known as someone that was of value and when we called, we got some help, I'm happy with that.
Go. Yeah, that's nice. That's touching. Awesome, mate. Would love to take you through a quick fire round. These are easy ones. I'm sure you'll smash them out of the park. Favorite sports team?
Favorite sports team? Being a Brisbane boy,
Broncos?
Dad taking us to the rugby when we were to the footy when we were young, Broncos.
Nice. What about favorite music type? What do you listen to? What's on your playlist?
Spotify. I'm a Swiftie, true and true.
Swiftie.
Taylor.
Confessing to being a Swiftie too in public arena.
Not just confessing, full blown. Absolutely. I think it's
the music. Show there is following her on the world tour.
The music is great, but I just love the story. I love her authenticity. I love the business aspect. There's just
that's so good, mate. That's fine. You don't have to justify it. If you love the music, that's fine too. I mean,
mate, you're not the only person who said it too. By the way, we've had we've had a couple of
popular. She's popular. She's number 3. What about favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie of all time
may have changed with the younger kids, but your favorite movie,
not inclusive Frozen.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but The Usual Suspects. I don't know what I don't know what it is about that movie, but yeah.
That's on your Christmas list. Nice. What about this one, mate? Favorite place to visit? You mentioned you guys do little getaways with your podcasts. Have you come across a place you'd like to get back to?
Yeah, so one of our shareholders has you can't really call it a farm, it's more of an estate down in northern New South Wales we take people to, but I've got a little farm out west with my brother. And that's the place that when I drive through those gates, I've driven out there sometimes just to turn the tap on and have a cup of tea and then come home. It's just a
happy place.
You get these places where it just gives you some energy.
I can relate to that. And this is the main one. This is really the only reason we wanted to start off a podcast. But we had to then find other topics to discuss, so we couldn't just base around this. But peanut butter. How do you like yours? Crunchy or smooth?
Crunchy, because I like everything crunchy. I like to add cornflakes to ice cream.
That's weird, but it's the right answer. But yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show. This has been fun, Don. Thanks for sharing all your insights.
No, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me. Love what you guys are putting out there. Keep going. And I love a lot of your guests are domain experts for particular SaaS aspects. So real value to the ecosystem. Well done.
Thank you.